My phone buzzed at 2:47 a.m. with a call that would change everything. The voice on the other end said 3 words that made my blood run cold. "Ms. Rachel Martinez, we need to talk." It was NASA's deputy director, and my brother had just made the biggest mistake of his life. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. 6 months earlier, I was pulling another all-nighter in the cramped basement office of Stellar Dynamics, a small aerospace consulting firm in Houston. While my colleagues upstairs enjoyed their ergonomic chairs and floor-to-ceiling windows, I'd been relegated to what everyone jokingly called the dungeon, a converted storage room with flickering fluorescent lights and the constant hum of ancient air conditioning units. My name is Rachel Martinez, and I'm a propulsion systems engineer. For the past 3 years, I'd been working on what I believed could revolutionize satellite deployment, a microthruster system that could extend satellite lifespans by decades while using 90% less fuel than current technology. The math was beautiful, the engineering was elegant, and the potential applications were staggering. The problem wasn't my work, the problem was my brother. Marcus Martinez had joined Stellar Dynamics 8 months after me, hired directly into a senior position thanks to his MBA from Northwestern, and what our mother always called his natural charm. While I spent my days buried in calculations and prototype testing, Marcus schmoozing with clients, playing golf with department heads, and somehow always managing to be in the right place at the right time when promotions were discussed. "Still down here playing with rocket toys, Rach?" Marcus would say whenever he ventured into the basement, usually when he needed me to explain some technical concept he'd promised to deliver to a client. He'd lean against my cluttered desk, adjusting his expensive tie, and flash that smile that had gotten him out of trouble since we were kids. The irony wasn't lost on me. Growing up, I was the one who built model rockets in our garage while Marcus played video games. I was the one who chose aerospace engineering while he initially wanted to be a sports broadcaster. Yet here we were, working for the same company, with him 3 levels above me on the organizational chart. My breakthrough came on a Tuesday in November. I'd been running simulations on my microthruster design for weeks, tweaking variables and testing different fuel compositions. The numbers that appeared on my screen that morning were almost too good to believe. Not only did my system work, but it worked better than I'd dared to hope. The efficiency ratings were off the charts. The cost projections showed savings in the hundreds of millions for long-term missions. Most importantly, the system could be retrofitted to existing satellites, meaning NASA wouldn't need to rebuild their entire fleet to benefit from the technology. I spent the next 72 hours documenting everything, every calculation, every test result, every iteration of the design. I created detailed technical drawings, wrote comprehensive reports, and prepared presentation materials that could explain the concept to both engineers and executives. This wasn't just another incremental improvement. This was the kind of breakthrough that could put Stellar Dynamics on the map. The company's quarterly innovation meeting was scheduled for the following Monday. Department heads would present their team's most promising projects to the executive board, with the winning concept receiving a substantial development budget and fast-track approval for patent applications. More importantly for me, the project leader would be promoted to senior systems engineer, a position that came with a 40% salary increase and a real office with windows. I submitted my proposal package on Thursday, making sure every detail was perfect. The technical specifications were flawless, the business case was compelling, and the presentation slides were clean and professional. I even included a small-scale working prototype that demonstrated the thruster's precision control capabilities. Friday afternoon, I was in the basement running final tests when my computer chimed with an email from our department head, Dr. Sarah Chen. The subject line made my heart skip: Innovation Meeting Presentation Assignment. But as I opened the email, my excitement turned to confusion, then disbelief, and finally to a cold rage that made my hands shake. "Rachel, thank you for your detailed technical documentation on the microthruster project. Your research has been invaluable to the development process. Marcus will be presenting the project at Monday's innovation meeting as the lead engineer. Please ensure all materials are transferred to him by the end of the day. His leadership and client-facing experience make him the ideal candidate to represent this technology to the board." I read the email 3 times, each time hoping I'd misunderstood something. But the message was crystal clear. My work, my breakthrough, my months of 18-hour days were being handed over to my brother like a birthday present. The transfer meeting happened in Marcus's spacious 4th-floor office. He sat behind his mahogany desk, nodding seriously as I explained the technical details, occasionally asking questions that revealed he barely understood the basic principles behind the system. So this little thruster thing, he said, holding up my prototype like it was a toy, it's basically just a more efficient version of what NASA already uses? It's not just more efficient, Marcus. It's a completely different approach to attitude control and orbital maintenance. The ion distribution system alone represents a fundamental breakthrough in... Right, he interrupted, waving his hand dismissively. Look, Rach, I appreciate all the technical stuff, but what matters is how we sell this to the board. They don't want to hear about ion distributions and orbital whatever. They want to know how much money it'll make and how fast we can deliver it. I watched him flip through my presentations, making notes in the margins, adding his own slides about market penetration and revenue projections. Numbers he'd clearly pulled from generic industry reports, having no real understanding of what our technology could actually accomplish. Don't worry, he said as I gathered my things to leave. I'll make sure to mention your contributions during the presentation. You'll get proper credit as part of the development team. Part of the development team. For work that was entirely mine. That weekend, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the times Marcus had taken credit for things throughout our lives. The science fair project I'd helped him with in high school, the college application essay I'd edited until it was completely rewritten, the business plan for his failed startup that I'd basically created from scratch. But this was different. This wasn't family dynamics or sibling rivalry. This was my career, my future, and potentially millions of dollars in lost opportunities. Monday morning, I arrived early and stationed myself in the back of the conference room where the innovation presentations would take place. The executive board was there in full force. CEO Patricia Westbrook, CTO Dr. James Liu, and 3 other senior vice presidents I recognized but had never spoken to. Marcus entered the room like he owned it, perfectly groomed and radiating confidence. He'd even worn his lucky Navy suit, the one he claimed had landed him his current position. His presentation setup was flawless, complete with my prototype displayed prominently on the table beside the projector. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, I'm excited to share a breakthrough that could position Stellar Dynamics as the leader in next-generation satellite technology. For the next 30 minutes, I watched my brother present my work as his own. He explained concepts he barely understood, using terminology he'd obviously memorized from my reports. When board members asked technical questions, he deflected with sales speak about market opportunities and competitive advantages. The worst part wasn't just that he was stealing credit, it was how good he was at it. Marcus had always been a natural presenter, and he sold my revolutionary microthruster system like he'd invented it himself. The board was impressed, asking detailed questions about implementation timelines and patent strategies. This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need, CEO Westbrook said as Marcus concluded his presentation. The potential applications for NASA contracts alone could transform our entire business model. Dr. Lowe leaned forward, studying the prototype. The technical specifications are remarkable. How long did it take your team to develop this? About 8 months of intensive development, Marcus replied smoothly. It required extensive collaboration with our propulsion specialists, but I'm proud to say we've created something truly groundbreaking. Our propulsion specialists. I was the only propulsion specialist on the project, and I was sitting 20 feet away, invisible to the people praising my work. The meeting ended with unanimous approval for full development funding and fast-track patent processing. Marcus received congratulations from every board member, along with the promotion I'd been working toward for 3 years. As the executives filed out, discussing implementation strategies and budget allocations, Marcus caught my eye from across the room. He shrugged apologetically, but his smile told a different story. He'd won again, just like always. But as I sat in that conference room, watching my brother bask in praise for work he hadn't done, I made a decision that would change both our lives forever. This time, I wasn't going to let him get away with it. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of humiliation and determination. Marcus had moved into a corner office on the 6th floor, complete with a personal assistant and a parking spot with his name on it. Meanwhile, I was still in the basement, now tasked with supporting the microthruster development team, which meant doing all the actual engineering work, while Marcus attended meetings and gave interviews to aerospace trade publications. The breaking point came when I found him in the company break room, showing off a framed article from Aerospace Weekly to a group of junior engineers. The headline read, "Rising Star Marcus Martinez Revolutionizes Satellite Technology." Below it was a photo of him in his Navy suit, holding my prototype like a trophy. The key insight, he was saying to his captivated audience, was realizing that traditional thruster designs were fundamentally flawed. It took months of experimentation, but eventually, I developed a completely new approach to ion distribution. One of the junior engineers, Kevin Walsh, raised his hand like we were in a classroom. "How did you come up with the specific fuel composition?" "The efficiency numbers are incredible. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss." Marcus paused for just a moment, long enough for me to see the panic flash across his face before his salesman instincts kicked in. "Well, that's proprietary information, obviously, but let's just say it involves some unconventional thinking about molecular structures." I couldn't take it anymore. Unconventional thinking about molecular structures? I stepped into the break room and the group turned to look at me. "That's interesting, Marcus, because I don't remember covering molecular chemistry in any of your business courses." The room went silent. Marcus's smile tightened, but he recovered quickly. "Rachel, perfect timing. Everyone, this is my sister Rachel. She's been invaluable as part of the technical support team for the microthruster project." Technical support team. For my own invention. "Actually," I said, pulling out my phone, "I was just reviewing some of the early development files. Marcus, do you remember the date when you first started working on the ion distribution calculations?" His confidence wavered slightly. "I don't keep track of every minor detail, because according to the file timestamps, the initial calculations were completed on September 15th. But your employment records show you were at that client conference in Denver from September 14th through 18th. Interesting how you managed to develop breakthrough technology while you were presenting marketing reports 3 states away." The junior engineers exchanged glances. Kevin Walsh's expression had shifted from admiration to confusion. "Wait, so who actually?" "I think Rachel might be a little confused about the timeline," Marcus interrupted, his voice losing its usual smoothness. "Team projects can get complicated, and sometimes individual contributions get blurred." But I wasn't finished. I'd spent the last 3 weeks documenting everything, and I'd learned something important. Every digital file in our company system was timestamped and tracked. Every email was logged. Every computer access was recorded. And Marcus had been sloppy. "Here's what's not blurred," I said, swiping through my phone. The original concept sketches were created on my workstation on August 3rd. The first successful simulation ran on my computer on October 12th. The prototype was built using materials I personally requisitioned through the engineering department. And every single technical document associated with this project shows my employee ID as the primary author. The break room had become uncomfortably quiet. Marcus's face was flushing red, but he was still trying to maintain control of the situation. "Look, everyone knows that innovative projects require team collaboration." "Then why," I said, opening my laptop, "does the patent application filed last week list you as the sole inventor?" That stopped him cold. The junior engineers were now staring at Marcus with expressions ranging from disappointment to disgust. Kevin Walsh shook his head and quietly left the room, followed by the others. Marcus waited until we were alone before dropping his facade entirely. "You're making a huge mistake, Rachel. You want to embarrass me in front of the whole company? Fine. But remember who has the corner office and who's still working in the basement. Nobody's going to believe you over me." "We'll see about that." But Marcus was partially right. When I tried to present my evidence to Dr. Chen, she listened politely and promised to, quote, "look into the matter." When I requested a meeting with the CTO, his assistant told me his calendar was full for the next month. The few colleagues I trusted enough to confide in were sympathetic but cautious. Nobody wanted to get involved in what looked like a messy family dispute that could damage their own careers. Meanwhile, Marcus's star continued to rise. The microthruster project was fast-tracked for a major presentation to NASA officials, with Marcus positioned as the lead presenter. Industry publications were calling him a, quote, visionary engineer, and speculating about his potential for executive leadership. He'd even been invited to speak at the International Space Development Conference in Las Vegas. I realized that fighting this battle within Stellar Dynamics was hopeless. Marcus had the relationships, the positioning, and the political skills to weather any internal challenge I could mount. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd put his name on patent applications and technical documents for technology he didn't understand and couldn't have created. That's when I decided to go directly to the source. NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland had a public inquiry system for technical submissions and patent reviews. As a taxpayer-funded organization, they were required to maintain transparency about their contractor relationships and technology evaluations. More importantly, they employed some of the world's leading experts in propulsion systems, people who could immediately recognize the difference between genuine innovation and corporate politicking. I spent an entire weekend preparing a comprehensive technical package. Unlike the sanitized presentations Marcus had been giving, this document included every calculation, every test result, every iteration of the design process. I included timestamps, file creation dates, and detailed explanations of the engineering principles involved. Most importantly, I included my original notebooks, handwritten pages showing the evolution of ideas that couldn't be faked or backdated. The package went to Dr. Amanda Richardson, NASA's Director of Advanced Propulsion Research. I'd read her papers in graduate school and knew she had a reputation for both brilliance and ruthlessness when it came to evaluating new technologies. I mailed the package on a Friday afternoon and tried not to think about it over the weekend. Monday morning brought a surprise. An email from Dr. Richardson's office requesting a phone call to discuss my, quote, interesting submission. The call was scheduled for Wednesday at 2 p.m., right in the middle of Marcus's big presentation to the Stellar Dynamics board about expanding the microthruster program. I locked myself in an empty conference room and dialed the number Dr. Richardson had provided. Ms. Martinez, her voice was crisp and professional. I've reviewed your technical documentation with my team. The work is impressive, genuinely innovative, but I have some questions about the corporate structure behind this technology. My heart was pounding. What kind of questions? Well, according to your brother's recent interviews and patent filings, he's positioned as the primary inventor. But the technical depth of your submission suggests a level of expertise that's inconsistent with his educational background and previous work history. Can you help me understand this discrepancy? I took a deep breath and told her everything. The stolen credit, the falsified timeline, the way Marcus had leveraged his position to claim ownership of work he couldn't possibly have done. Dr. Richardson listened without interrupting, occasionally asking for clarification on technical points that only the actual inventor would know. Ms. Martinez, she said when I finished, NASA takes intellectual property very seriously, especially when we're considering significant contract opportunities. If what you're telling me is accurate, this represents not just internal corporate politics, but potential fraud in federal contracting processes. She paused, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. I'm going to need you to come to Maryland next week for a comprehensive technical review. Bring everything, your notebooks, your prototypes, your original calculations. We'll have a panel of engineers evaluate the technology and determine who actually developed it. If your claims are substantiated, NASA will need to reconsider our entire relationship with Stellar Dynamics. After I hung up, I sat in that empty conference room for 10 minutes, trying to process what had just happened. NASA wasn't just interested in my technology. They were investigating whether Marcus had committed fraud. The implications were staggering. But I also realized that I'd just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. By going to NASA directly, I'd escalated this far beyond a simple workplace dispute. If I was right, Marcus's career was about to implode in the most public way possible. If I was wrong, mine certainly would. Either way, there was no going back now. The week leading up to my NASA meeting was the longest of my life. I couldn't tell anyone at work where I was going. Officially, I'd taken personal days to visit my grandmother in Phoenix. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was lying to protect myself while my brother had built his entire career on lies. Marcus, meanwhile, was riding higher than ever. The day before my departure, he'd been featured on the cover of Space Industry Today with the headline, "The New Face of American Innovation." The article described him as a, quote, brilliant engineer turned visionary leader, and speculated about his potential candidacy for executive positions at major aerospace corporations. I printed out the article and added it to my growing file of evidence. Every interview, every presentation, every public statement Marcus made was another piece of rope for the noose he was unknowingly tying around his own career. The flight to Baltimore was turbulent, which seemed appropriate given the storm I was about to unleash. I'd packed 2 suitcases, one with clothes for a 3-day trip, and another with every piece of documentation I'd accumulated over the past 6 months. Original notebooks, prototype components, hard drives containing backup files, even receipts for materials I'd purchased with my own money during late-night testing sessions. Goddard Space Flight Center was more impressive in person than I'd imagined. The security checkpoint alone took 30 minutes, with multiple ID verifications and background checks. By the time I reached Dr. Richardson's office, I felt like I was entering a vault containing the nation's most sensitive secrets. Dr. Amanda Richardson was not what I'd expected. Based on her academic papers and professional achievements, I'd pictured someone intimidating and formal. Instead, she was a petite woman in her 50s, with graying hair and laugh lines around her eyes. She greeted me warmly and offered coffee before getting down to business. Ms. Martinez, before we begin the technical review, I want you to understand the gravity of what you've alleged. If your brother has indeed misrepresented his role in developing this technology, it's not just academic misconduct. It's potential fraud involving federal contract opportunities worth hundreds of millions of dollars. She led me to a conference room where 3 other NASA engineers were waiting. Dr. Chen Liu, a propulsion systems specialist. Dr. Sarah Webb, an expert in satellite attitude control. And Dr. Michael Torres, whose work on ion thruster efficiency I'd cited extensively in my original research. We're going to conduct what we call a deep dive technical evaluation, Dr. Richardson explained. We'll examine your documentation, test your prototypes, and ask detailed questions about the development process. This isn't an interrogation, it's a scientific peer review. We want to understand not just what you created, but how you created it. The next 6 hours were simultaneously exhausting and exhilarating. The NASA team dissected every aspect of my work with a precision that reminded me why I'd become an engineer in the first place. They didn't just want to see the final results. They wanted to understand my thinking process, my problem-solving methodology, even my mistakes and dead ends. Dr. Torres was particularly interested in my fuel composition innovations. The molecular binding approach you've used here, he said, studying my handwritten calculations, it's completely novel. I've been working in this field for 20 years, and I've never seen anyone attempt this particular solution to the efficiency problem. How did you arrive at this specific formula? Dr. Webb asked, pointing to a complex equation in my notebook. I walked them through my reasoning, explaining how I'd combined principles from 3 different branches of chemistry to create a fuel mixture that was both highly efficient and remarkably stable. As I talked, I could see recognition dawning in their eyes. This wasn't just memorized information or regurgitated research. This was the deep understanding that only comes from actually solving the problems yourself. Dr. Liu had been quietly examining my prototype during most of the discussion. Ms. Martinez, she finally said, can you explain the manufacturing process for these micronozzles? The precision required is extraordinary. I described the custom fabrication techniques I'd developed, including several innovations that had taken months to perfect. These weren't things you could learn from reading papers or attending presentations. They were hard-won insights that came from countless hours of trial and error. By the end of the session, the mood in the room had shifted dramatically. What had started as a formal evaluation had become something closer to a doctoral defense, with some of the country's leading experts expressing genuine excitement about the potential applications of my technology. Ms. Martinez, Dr. Richardson said as we wrapped up, I've been in this field for 30 years, and I can confidently say that your work represents a genuine breakthrough. The efficiency gains alone could revolutionize how we approach long-term space missions." She paused, gathering her thoughts carefully. "However, we need to address the elephant in the room. Your brother has been presenting this technology as his own invention to potential government contractors. That's not just unethical, it's potentially criminal. NASA has a zero-tolerance policy for contractor fraud, and we're obligated to investigate any credible allegations." Dr. Torres leaned forward. "We'll need to interview Mr. Martinez as well, obviously. If he can demonstrate the same level of technical understanding you've shown today, then perhaps there's been some misunderstanding about the collaboration process." I almost laughed at the thought of Marcus trying to explain molecular binding theories or manufacturing tolerances to these experts, but I also felt a stab of guilt. He was my brother, after all, and I was about to destroy his career. "What happens next?" I asked. "We'll be conducting a formal review of all stellar dynamics contracts and pending proposals," Dr. Richardson explained. "We'll also be reaching out to your company's executives to discuss the intellectual property questions surrounding this technology. Depending on what we find, this could result in contract cancellations, legal proceedings, or both." She handed me a business card with her direct number. "Ms. Martinez, I want you to know that what you've done today took considerable courage. Scientific integrity is the foundation of everything we do here, and people who compromise that integrity, regardless of their titles or connections, need to be held accountable." The flight home felt different than the journey out. I'd accomplished what I'd set out to do. NASA now knew the truth about my technology and Marcus's deception. But I also knew that I'd just set in motion a chain of events that would probably destroy my brother's career and potentially tear our family apart. I landed in Houston at 9:30 p.m. and drove straight home, emotionally drained but oddly relieved. For the first time in months, I felt like I'd reclaimed some measure of control over my own life and career. That relief lasted exactly 12 hours. I was having coffee the next morning when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my mother's number, but when I answered, it was Marcus's voice I heard, panicked and angry in a way I'd rarely experienced. "What the hell did you do, Rachel? I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, I just got a call from Dr. Chen. NASA contacted Stellar Dynamics yesterday, asking for a complete review of all my project files and technical documentation. They want to interview me next week about the quote, development timeline and technical specifications of the microthruster system." I could hear the fear in his voice now, beneath the anger. "They know something, Rachel. They know something, and the only way they could know is if someone told them. Was it you? Did you go to NASA behind my back?" I took a deep breath. After months of watching him take credit for my work, after weeks of seeing him celebrated as a visionary while I remained invisible, I felt a strange calm settle over me. "Yes, Marcus, it was me." The silence that followed was deafening. When he finally spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "Do you have any idea what you've done? This isn't just about me. This could destroy the entire company. People's jobs, Rachel? People's livelihoods? Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to steal my work and present it as your own." "Steal? Rachel, we're family. We're supposed to support each other, not..." "Support goes both ways, Marcus. When exactly were you planning to support me? After you got promoted to VP? After you parlayed my invention into a job at Boeing or Lockheed? Or were you just going to keep me in the basement forever, cranking out innovations for you to claim?" Another long silence. "NASA is going to find out the truth," I continued. "They're going to discover that you can't explain the technical details because you didn't develop them. They're going to see that every piece of real innovation came from me, not you. And then everyone is going to know exactly what kind of person you really are. Rachel, please, we can fix this. We can say it was a collaborative project, that we worked together." "No, Marcus, we can't. Because it wasn't collaborative, and we both know it. You stole my work, you lied to everyone about it, and now you're going to face the consequences." I hung up the phone and turned it off. Whatever happened next, I was ready for it. But I had no idea that the real drama was just beginning. 3 years into my Pentagon position, I thought the Marcus chapter of my life was permanently closed. I was wrong. It was a Tuesday morning in October when my assistant, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Park, knocked on my office door with an expression I'd never seen before, something between confusion and barely suppressed amusement. "General Martinez, we have an unusual situation. There's someone in the lobby requesting a meeting with you. He claims to be your brother and says it's urgent family business. Marcus." After 3 years of silence, radio interviews where he blamed vindictive colleagues for his downfall, and a brief stint selling insurance in Tampa, he'd somehow found his way to one of the most secure buildings in Washington, D.C. Did he say what he wanted? He mentioned something about a business opportunity that could benefit both of your careers. Security ran a background check. He's clean, but... She paused. His financial records show some interesting patterns. Multiple failed startup attempts, defaulted business loans, and what appears to be a recent windfall from an unknown source. Quote, I almost laughed. After everything that had happened, Marcus was still trying to angle for some kind of advantage, but my curiosity got the better of me. Send him up, but keep security close. I have a feeling this is going to be interesting. 20 minutes later, Marcus walked into my office like he was entering a boardroom where he belonged. 3 years had not been kind to him. His once perfect appearance showed signs of stress. Graying temples, lines around his eyes, a slight paunch that suggested too many business lunches and not enough success to justify them. But his smile was the same confident expression I remembered from childhood. Wow, Rachel, this place is incredible. And, General Martinez, I have to admit, I'm impressed. He settled into the chair across from my desk without being invited, looking around at the awards, commendations, and classified project photos that lined my walls. I suppose you're wondering why I'm here. The thought had crossed my mind. Marcus reached into his briefcase and pulled out a tablet, setting it on my desk with the screen facing me. I want to show you something that's going to change both of our lives. The screen displayed technical schematics for what appeared to be an advanced communication satellite system. At first glance, it looked sophisticated, maybe even revolutionary. But as I studied the details, I started noticing familiar elements. Very familiar elements. Marcus, where did you get these designs? That's the beautiful part, Rachel. I've been working with a consortium of international investors who are developing next-generation satellite technology. They approached me because of my reputation in the aerospace industry. I stared at him. Your reputation? Marcus, you were convicted of fraud. You're banned from working on any government contracts. What reputation are you talking about? That was all a misunderstanding that got blown out of proportion. These investors understand that sometimes corporate politics can overshadow genuine innovation. They're more interested in results than bureaucratic drama. He leaned forward, his salesman instincts kicking into high gear. Rachel, they're offering me a position as Chief Technology Officer for their new American subsidiary. The starting salary is $2 million, plus equity that could be worth tens of millions if the technology performs as expected. Quote, the pieces were starting to come together, and I felt a cold dread settling in my stomach. Marcus, who exactly are these investors? A diverse group. European venture capital, some Asian technology firms, a few private equity groups. Very well funded, very sophisticated. They've been tracking developments in advanced propulsion and communication systems for years. I looked more carefully at the schematics on his tablet. The satellite designs incorporated elements that looked suspiciously similar to classified defense projects I'd been working on. Not identical, but close enough to suggest that someone had access to information they shouldn't have. Marcus, I need you to listen to me very carefully. These investors, did any of them ask you specific questions about your previous work, about your sister's projects, about anything related to military or defense applications? Well, naturally, they were interested in my background with advanced propulsion systems. I explained how I'd developed the microthruster technology and how the government had misappropriated the intellectual property. They were very sympathetic about the whole situation. My blood ran cold. Marcus had no idea what he'd stumbled into, but I was beginning to understand exactly what was happening. Foreign intelligence services had been trying to penetrate American defense technology programs for years, and my brother, bitter, desperate, and completely oblivious to national security implications, had just made himself the perfect asset. Marcus, I need you to tell me everything, every conversation, every meeting, every document they've shown you, and I need you to tell me right now. Rachel, you're being paranoid. These are legitimate business. Marcus. My voice carried the authority I'd developed from 3 years of commanding military engineers. This is not a business opportunity. This is a national security threat, and you are in serious danger of committing treason. For the first time since he'd entered my office, Marcus's confidence wavered. Treason? Rachel, you're being dramatic. These are just some investors who want to. Marcus, the satellite designs you just showed me incorporate classified American defense technology. Technology that you shouldn't know about, that your, quote, investors definitely shouldn't know about, and that could compromise critical national security programs if it falls into the wrong hands. Quote, I picked up my secure phone and dialed a number I'd hoped never to use. Lieutenant Colonel Park, I need a security team in my office immediately. And get me Admiral Hayes on the encrypted line. Marcus was starting to panic. Rachel, what are you doing? These people are going to think I'm some kind of spy or something. Marcus, you might be some kind of spy. The question is whether you're doing it intentionally, or whether you're just the most useful idiot in the history of espionage. The next 6 hours were a blur of security interviews, technical evaluations, and increasingly disturbing revelations about Marcus's business opportunity. The FBI counterintelligence team that arrived at the Pentagon confirmed my worst fears. The consortium that had recruited Marcus was a front for a foreign intelligence operation designed to extract American defense technology. The satellite schematics Marcus had shown me contained design elements from at least 4 different classified projects. Information that could only have come from someone with high-level security clearance and access to multiple defense programs. Information like mine. General Martinez, Agent Jennifer Walsh from the FBI's Counterintelligence Division, sat across from me in a secure conference room. We need to understand exactly what your brother might have told these individuals about your work here. He doesn't have access to any classified information. He doesn't even have a security clearance. But he knows about your position, your projects, your colleagues. And based on the technical accuracy of some of these satellite designs, someone has been providing them with very specific intelligence about American defense capabilities. The implication hit me like a physical blow. You think Marcus has been feeding them information about my work. We think Marcus has been manipulated into providing information he didn't realize was sensitive. The psychological profile fits perfectly. A disgraced former engineer, with a grudge against the system that destroyed his career, recruited by people who positioned themselves as victims of American corporate corruption. Agent Walsh pulled out a thick file. General, we've been tracking this particular intelligence operation for 8 months. They've been systematically targeting family members of defense contractors, using personal relationships to gather information that would be impossible to obtain through traditional espionage methods. Quote, my hands were shaking as I processed what she was telling me. Marcus hadn't just stumbled into a foreign intelligence operation. He'd been deliberately targeted because of his relationship to me. His bitterness about his own downfall had made him the perfect, unwitting asset for people who wanted to steal American military secrets. What happens now? Now, General, we're going to find out exactly how much damage has been done. And we're going to use your brother to help us track down everyone involved in this operation. Agent Walsh leaned forward. Marcus is going to continue his relationship with these investors, but now he'll be working for us. Every meeting, every conversation, every document exchange will be monitored and recorded. We're going to map their entire network and identify every American citizen who's been compromised. And if Marcus refuses to cooperate, then he'll be charged with espionage, conspiracy, and treason. Given the sensitivity of the information involved, he'd be looking at life in prison without the possibility of parole. I thought about my brother sitting in a holding cell 3 floors below, probably still convinced that this was all some kind of misunderstanding that would blow over once he explained himself properly. He had no idea that his desperate attempt to rebuild his career had made him a traitor to his own country. General Martinez, Agent Walsh continued, I need to ask you a difficult question. Are you prepared to help us use your brother as an asset against a foreign intelligence operation, knowing that it might destroy what's left of your family relationships. I looked out the window at the Pentagon parking lot, where American flags flew over the cars of thousands of people dedicated to defending our country. People like me, who'd spent years developing technologies that could protect American interests and American lives. Then I thought about Marcus, sitting in a cell below, finally facing the consequences of a lifetime of cutting corners and taking credit he hadn't earned. This time, though, the stakes weren't just his career. They were national security. "Agent Walsh," I said, "my brother made his choice when he decided to sell out his own country for money. I'll do whatever it takes to protect American interests, even if it means destroying what's left of my relationship with Marcus." "Good. Because tomorrow, General, your brother is going to make the most important sales call of his life. And this time, he's going to be working for the good guys." As I watched the sun set over the Pentagon that evening, I realized that Marcus had given me one final gift: the chance to prove that family loyalty has limits and that some principles are more important than blood relationships. He'd spent his entire life believing that connections mattered more than competence, that relationships trumped results, that family ties could overcome any moral compromise. Tomorrow, he was going to learn that he was wrong about that, too. The sting operation began exactly 72 hours later in a luxury hotel suite overlooking the Potomac River. Marcus sat across from two men who'd introduced themselves as Viktor Petrov and Chen Wei, supposedly representing European and Asian investment interests. What they didn't know was that every word of their conversation was being recorded by FBI surveillance equipment hidden throughout the room. I watched the entire meeting from a van parked 3 blocks away, surrounded by federal agents and enough electronic monitoring equipment to run a small television station. Agent Walsh had insisted I observe the operation in real time, partly for technical consultation, and partly because my presence would ensure Marcus didn't deviate from the script we'd rehearsed. "Mr. Martinez," Viktor Petrov spoke with a slight accent that could have been Russian or Eastern European, "we've reviewed the additional technical specifications you provided. Our engineering team is very impressed with the propulsion efficiency calculations." On my monitor, I could see Marcus nodding confidently, completely unaware that the additional specifications he'd shared were actually FBI-created decoy documents designed to expose the spy network's technical interests. "The satellite communication protocols are particularly innovative," Chen Wei added, studying a tablet that displayed fake schematics my Pentagon team had created specifically for this operation. "Our partners in Beijing are eager to move forward with implementation." Beijing, Agent Walsh made a note and signaled to her communications team. We now had confirmation that Chinese intelligence services were involved in the operation. "There is one concern," Victor continued, his tone becoming more serious. "Our technical review suggests that some of these innovations might be restricted by American export control regulations. We need assurance that all intellectual property rights have been properly secured." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Even he understood the implications of what Victor was asking. "Everything I've shared represents legitimate technological development from my previous work in the private sector," he said, using the exact phrasing Agent Walsh had coached him to use. "Of course," Chen Wei smiled. "However, we understand that your sister currently holds a significant position with the American defense establishment. Has she expressed any concerns about your new business relationships?" My blood ran cold. They knew about our family connection, which meant they'd been planning this operation for months, possibly years. Marcus had been targeted not just because of his technical background, but specifically because of his relationship to me. "My sister and I don't discuss business matters," Marcus replied, again following the script. "Her work is classified and my projects are completely separate from government contracts." Victor leaned forward. "Mr. Martinez, we appreciate your discretion. However, our partners would be very interested in any insights you might have about American defense technology trends. Nothing classified, of course, just general market intelligence that might help us position our investments more effectively." This was it, the moment when Victor would either reveal the true nature of the operation or decide that Marcus wasn't worth the risk. Agent Walsh had warned me that foreign intelligence operatives were extremely cautious about exposure, and the slightest suspicion could cause them to abandon the entire recruitment. "I understand what you're looking for," Marcus said carefully, "but I want to be very clear about boundaries. I'm interested in legitimate business opportunities, not in compromising American security interests. For a moment, the hotel suite was completely silent. Victor and Chen Wei exchanged glances, and I could see them weighing their options. Then Victor smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Martinez, perhaps we should speak more directly. Our organization represents certain international interests that are willing to pay substantial compensation for strategic information about American defense capabilities. Your position as the brother of a Pentagon general makes you uniquely valuable to us. There it was. Agent Walsh pumped her fist in silent celebration as our recording equipment captured Victor's explicit admission of espionage recruitment. We're prepared to offer you $5 million immediately, Chen Wei continued, with additional payments based on the quality and timeliness of intelligence you provide. All we need is regular updates about your sister's projects, her colleagues, and any technical developments you might overhear during family conversations. Marcus was supposed to express interest and arrange a follow-up meeting, giving us time to coordinate with international law enforcement agencies. Instead, he stood up abruptly and walked to the window overlooking the river. You know what's funny? He said, his back still turned to the two men. 3 years ago, I probably would have said yes. 3 years ago, I was so angry at my sister, so bitter about losing my career, that I might have convinced myself this was justified revenge. Agent Walsh grabbed her radio. He's going off script. All units stand by for immediate intervention. But Marcus wasn't finished. He turned around to face Victor and Chen Wei, and for the first time in my life, I saw something in my brother's expression that I'd never seen before. Genuine integrity. The truth is, gentlemen, my sister didn't destroy my career. I destroyed my career by stealing her work and lying about it. She didn't betray me. I betrayed her, and I betrayed every principle our parents taught us about honesty and hard work. Victor's friendly demeanor evaporated instantly. Mr. Martinez, I think you misunderstand the nature of our conversation. No, I understand perfectly. You want me to betray my country and my family for money. You targeted me because you thought my bitterness would make me easy to manipulate. And 3 years ago, you would have been right. Marcus walked back to the table and picked up the tablet containing the fake technical specifications. But here's what you didn't count on. Spending 3 years watching my sister become everything I pretended to be taught me something important. Real success doesn't come from shortcuts or stolen credit or foreign money. It comes from actually earning what you achieve. Chen Wei was reaching inside his jacket. Agent Walsh later told me he was probably going for a weapon. But before he could complete the motion, FBI agents burst through the hotel suite door with weapons drawn. Federal agents! Nobody moves! Quote. The next few minutes were controlled chaos as Victor and Chen Wei were arrested, searched, and read their rights. Marcus stood in the middle of it all, looking strangely calm for someone who'd just blown up an international espionage operation. Agent Walsh approached him as the suspects were led away in handcuffs. Mr. Martinez, that was either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. Agent Walsh, can I ask you something? When you briefed me on this operation, you said that if I didn't cooperate, I'd be facing life in prison for treason. But if I went through with selling information to these people, wouldn't that actually be treason? She smiled. Mr. Martinez, the information you were sharing was all fabricated. We weren't asking you to betray your country. We were asking you to help catch people who wanted you to betray your country. There's a significant difference. Marcus nodded slowly. I see. So the real test wasn't whether I'd work with you. The real test was whether I'd work with them. And you passed, Mr. Martinez. Spectacularly. 6 months later, I stood in a Pentagon conference room as Admiral Hayes presented Marcus with a citation for civilian service to national security. The foreign intelligence network he'd helped expose had been operating for over 5 years, compromising multiple defense contractors and stealing millions of dollars worth of classified technology. Mr. Martinez, Admiral Hayes said as she pinned the citation to his lapel, your actions prevented a significant breach of American defense capabilities. Your country is grateful for your service. Marcus looked uncomfortable with the formal recognition. Admiral, I appreciate the honor, but I think we should be clear about what actually happened. I didn't start working with the FBI because I was patriotic. I started working with them because I was facing prison time. The patriotic part came later. Mr. Martinez, the motivation for doing the right thing is less important than actually doing it. You had a choice between personal gain and national security, and you made the right choice. That's what matters. After the ceremony, Marcus and I walked together through the Pentagon corridors, the same halls where 3 years earlier he'd been interrogated as a suspected fraud. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Rachel, I need to say something, and I need you to let me finish before you respond. Quote. I nodded, curious about what my brother, who'd never been particularly good at apologies, wanted to tell me. I spent most of my life believing that success was about being in the right place, at the right time, knowing the right people, and taking credit for the best opportunities. I thought you were naive for caring so much about actually doing the work, instead of just positioning yourself for recognition. We stopped walking near a wall covered with portraits of Medal of Honor recipients, men and women who'd sacrificed everything for principles larger than themselves. But watching you over the past few years taught me something I should have learned much earlier. There's no such thing as sustainable success built on lies. Eventually, reality catches up with everyone, and when it does, the only thing that matters is whether you actually earned what you claim to achieve. Marcus looked directly at me for the first time in months. I'm not asking for forgiveness, because I don't deserve it. I'm not asking for a relationship, because I haven't earned it. But I am telling you that you were right about everything, and I was wrong about everything, and I'm sorry it took a federal investigation for me to figure that out. I studied my brother's face, looking for signs of the manipulation and self-serving rhetoric that had characterized most of our interactions over the years. Instead, I saw something I'd never seen before: genuine humility. Marcus, what are you going to do now? I'm going back to school. Engineering school, this time. I'm 42 years old, and I'm going to learn how to actually build the things I spent years claiming I'd invented. It's going to take me 4 years to get a degree that you earned 20 years ago. But at least when I'm finished, I'll know that everything on my resume actually belongs to me. He paused, looking around at the Pentagon's marble walls and military portraits. And maybe someday, if I work hard enough and prove that I've actually changed, I'll be able to contribute something meaningful to the world instead of just taking credit for other people's contributions. As I watched Marcus walk away toward the Pentagon's exit, I realized that his greatest accomplishment wasn't helping the FBI catch foreign spies or earning a citation for civilian service. His greatest accomplishment was finally becoming the person he'd always claimed to be, someone worthy of the success he'd spent years trying to steal. Sometimes the best endings aren't about getting revenge on the people who wronged you. Sometimes they're about watching those people become worthy of the respect they always wanted, but never earned. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, that person is your brother. 5 years after the Pentagon ceremony, I stood in the auditorium of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, watching my brother walk across the stage to receive his master's degree in aerospace engineering. At 47 years old, Marcus was the oldest graduate in his class, but he'd earned something more valuable than just a diploma. He'd earned the right to call himself an engineer. The irony wasn't lost on me that he was graduating from the same program I'd completed 25 years earlier. But this time, every calculation, every project, every breakthrough was genuinely his own work. Dr. Martinez, the dean announced as Marcus approached the podium, graduating summa cum laude with a thesis on sustainable propulsion systems for deep space exploration. Dr. Martinez. Marcus had insisted on using his full name and title throughout graduate school, refusing to trade on any family connections or past notoriety. His professors knew him simply as a mature student who worked harder than anyone else and never asked for special treatment. His thesis advisor, Dr. Patricia Chen, no relation to our former boss, had told me privately that Marcus's research represented some of the most innovative thinking she'd seen in decades. Your brother has a unique perspective, she'd said. He approaches problems like someone who's seen what happens when shortcuts replace substance. His work has a thoroughness and integrity that's rare in young researchers. At 47, Marcus was starting his career over from scratch, but he was approaching it with the wisdom of someone who'd learned the hard way that there are no sustainable substitutes for competence. After the ceremony, our family gathered for dinner at a small restaurant near the MIT campus. Our parents, now in their 70s, couldn't stop beaming with pride. They'd watched their son fall from grace, face federal charges, and rebuild his entire life from the ground up. This graduation represented more than academic achievement. It represented redemption. "Marcus," our father said, raising his wineglass, "I want you to know how proud your mother and I are. Not just of your grades or your degree, but of the man you've become. It takes real courage to admit you've been wrong, and even more courage to do the work necessary to become right." Marcus looked uncomfortable with the praise, a reaction that was still new for someone who'd spent most of his life seeking constant validation. "Dad, I appreciate that, but let's be honest about what happened. I didn't choose courage. I chose the only path that didn't lead to prison. The courage part came later, when I realized that I actually wanted to earn what I'd always claimed to deserve." Our mother reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "Marcus, the why matters less than the what. You could have done the minimum required to satisfy the FBI and then gone back to your old ways. Instead, you rebuilt your entire life around principles you'd never practiced before. That's not just courage. That's transformation." Marcus smiled, but I could see the weight of past mistakes still lingering in his expression. Some guilt, I'd learned, never completely disappears. It just transforms into motivation to do better. "Speaking of transformation," he said, turning to me, "Rachel, I have something I want to share with everyone." He pulled out an official-looking document and placed it on the table. "This is a patent application for a new type of ion drive system that could reduce interplanetary travel times by 60%. The application was filed last week, and it's going to revolutionize how we think about deep space missions." Our parents looked confused by the technical implications, but they could see the excitement in Marcus's eyes. This was the look of someone who genuinely created something meaningful. "That's amazing, Marcus," I said, genuinely impressed. "The efficiency calculations alone must have taken months to perfect. 14 months, actually. Every equation checked and double-checked. Every simulation run dozens of times. Every component tested, until I was absolutely certain it would work exactly as designed." He paused, looking directly at me. "Rachel, there's something else. The patent application lists two inventors, Marcus Martinez as primary researcher, and Rachel Martinez as contributing consultant. I included your name because some of the foundational principles build on research you published 3 years ago about ion distribution efficiency." Quote. I stared at the document, reading my name listed as a co-inventor on technology that was genuinely revolutionary. "Marcus, I didn't work on this project. I shouldn't be listed as..." "Rachel, you've been my unofficial consultant for the past 2 years, answering technical questions, reviewing my calculations, and helping me avoid dead ends that could have wasted months of research. Your contributions were significant, and they deserve recognition." This was perhaps the most surprising transformation of all. Marcus was actively sharing credit for work where he could have legitimately claimed sole ownership. The brother who'd once stolen my innovations was now insisting on recognizing contributions I'd barely thought about. "Besides," he continued with a grin that reminded me of our childhood, "I figured it was time for the Martinez name to appear on a patent application for work that was actually done by people named Martinez." 6 months later, I found myself in a situation I'd never imagined, sitting in a venture capital firm's conference room as Marcus pitched his ion drive technology to potential investors. But this time, instead of stealing someone else's work, he was presenting innovations that were genuinely his own. "The propulsion system represents a fundamental breakthrough in energy efficiency," Marcus explained to the room full of investors, his presentation backed by months of rigorous testing and peer review. "Independent verification by NASA and the European Space Agency confirms that this technology could reduce the cost of Mars missions by 80%, while cutting travel time nearly in half." One of the investors, a woman in her 50s who'd built her fortune backing aerospace startups, leaned forward with interest. "Dr. Martinez, this is impressive work. But I have to ask, given your previous experiences in the aerospace industry, How can investors be confident that this technology won't face similar intellectual property challenges? It was the question Marcus had been preparing for since he'd decided to commercialize his research. His response revealed just how completely he'd transformed his approach to business and ethics. Ms. Rodriguez, that's exactly the right question to ask, and I'm glad you brought it up directly. My previous experiences taught me that sustainable success requires absolute transparency about intellectual property, rigorous documentation of all research processes, and complete honesty about technical capabilities and limitations. He pulled out a thick binder and placed it on the conference table. This document contains every calculation, every test result, every iteration of the design process, all independently verified by MIT faculty and peer-reviewed by leading propulsion experts. Every patent filing includes complete disclosure of prior art and collaborative contributions. Most importantly, every technical claim has been validated through actual testing rather than theoretical projections. Marcus looked around the room, making eye contact with each potential investor. I can guarantee you that this technology won't face intellectual property challenges, because I've spent 5 years learning how to do things the right way. The work is mine, the innovations are legitimate, and the business practices are completely transparent. The presentation concluded with Marcus receiving preliminary commitments for $12 million in seed funding, enough to build a working prototype and begin commercial development. As we left the building, I realized that my brother had accomplished something remarkable. He'd built a successful business based entirely on his own merit. Rachel, he said as we walked through downtown Boston, I want to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. I nodded, curious about what was coming next. Do you think I've actually changed, or do you think I'm just better at hiding my old patterns? It was a question that went to the heart of everything that had happened between us over the past decade. Marcus had spent years lying to himself and everyone else about his capabilities and achievements. Now he was asking me to evaluate whether his transformation was genuine or just another form of deception. Marcus, 5 years ago, if someone had offered you $12 million for technology you'd stolen from someone else, you would have taken the money and convinced yourself you deserved it. Today, you turn down easier opportunities to build something legitimately your own, even though it meant years of additional work and uncertainty. Quote, I paused, thinking about all the times he could have taken shortcuts during his graduate studies, all the moments when he could have traded on our family connection or his past notoriety for personal advantage. But more importantly, you've spent the past 5 years proving your transformation through actions, not words. You didn't just apologize for stealing my work. You rebuilt your entire career to ensure you'd never be tempted to steal anyone else's work. You didn't just claim to value integrity. You spent years demonstrating integrity when no one was watching and when it would have been easier to cut corners. Marcus nodded slowly, processing what I'd said. You know what the strangest part is? I'm happier now than I ever was when I was taking credit for other people's work. Back then, I was constantly afraid of being exposed as a fraud. Now, even when things get difficult, I know that everything I've achieved actually belongs to me. He stopped walking and looked at me seriously. Rachel, I spent most of our childhood competing with you, most of our professional lives envying you, and several years actively undermining you. But I want you to know that you're not just my sister. You're also my role model. Everything good about the person I've become, I learned by watching how you handled success, failure, and everything in between. As we continued walking through the city where Marcus had spent 5 years rebuilding his life and career, I reflected on how completely our relationship had transformed. We'd gone from siblings to rivals to enemies to allies, and finally to something we'd never been before: genuine partners in each other's success. The Marcus who'd stolen my microthruster designs would never understand the satisfaction that comes from earning recognition through actual achievement. But Marcus, who'd spent 14 months perfecting his ion drive technology, understood something more valuable than any stolen credit: the irreplaceable feeling of knowing that your success is entirely your own. Some stories end with justice. Some end with revenge. The best stories end with redemption, not just for the people who were wronged, but for the people who did the wronging. And sometimes, if you're very fortunate, those people turn out to be your family. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.